Well, this week from Living Wisely, Living Well, the topic is Accept Responsibility for Your Actions. In the reading for August 12th, in inviting others to participate in decisions that are yours to make, the responsibility for the outcome will be yours also. Allow no one's suggestions to become your excuse for failure. Accept only ideas that resonate with your intuition. Never feel obligated to accept a suggestion merely because you have asked for it. This reading today that Swami Kriyanandaji has given us is essentially telling us to live from within. And when you make decisions in life, yes, it can be very helpful to get the advice of friends, family, especially wise ones, as we'll talk about in a minute. But in the end, we must accept responsibility for all of our actions and also for the outcome. Now, I think in some people that's a little bit scary thought. I think many people would prefer others to make decisions for them, especially growing up. We are somewhat trained as a child that our parents make decisions for us. But at a certain point, we do have to accept responsibility, even for the direction of our lives, and not blame anyone when decisions are made for us that turn out not to be ideal. I was struck by this last night. I heard a story that I've heard before many times, where a couple of friends were talking, and this one person said that she's a computer engineer, and in her company she was talking to a few friends, and she discovered that none of them enjoyed what they were doing. And the reason they ended up as computer engineers and in that field was that when it came time to choose a career, their parents told them that they could either become a doctor or an engineer. And the thought of becoming a doctor was even worse, so they decided to become engineers based solely on pressure from their parents, not on something that came from within. And so at a certain point, especially as we grow up and start becoming an adult and choosing the direction of our lives, we do have to tune in to what is in ourselves and to choose a direction that comes from within. Also to accept responsibility for it, even when we make mistakes. And I think on one hand that's a bit of a scary thought, but in fact it's how we grow. It's how we learn. It's how we understand what is true inner guidance, what is just fantasy or desires. And this is how we grow to understand how to direct our lives, how to develop responsibility, willpower, all of these things. And so try to direct your life from within. Swami Kriyanandaji very often used this point and way of expressing to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in, meaning to tune in inwardly in meditation, with intuition, to really what is trying to happen in our lives and in our service to others, in our actions, in our work, in our family decisions. Paramahansa Yogananda once said that, and this was a very interesting advice that he gave, and it was specifically about choosing a career or a vocation where one would spend one's life. And the advice he gave was very unusual. He said to try to remember or tune in to an avid interest that you had growing up. It could have been as a child or a young teenager. What you were truly interested in doing with your life, or a particular field that you were very interested in before the pressures of society, of peer pressures, pressure of parents to go in a certain direction, in a certain career, were starting to invade your thoughts. And Yoganandaji said very often you can find what is your life's vocation and goal by tuning in that way. And you will find that those who are the greatest successes in life, the most notable ones, inventors, people who have started businesses, this is exactly what they did. They did not follow, as the saying goes, they did follow, in fact, as the saying goes, the road less traveled, which was coming from within. They followed an interest that was very avid and very strong within themselves. And you will find that if you follow an interest like that you will, one, be happier, but two, you'll also be successful because it is a samskar or a impression from past lives, something that you perhaps have some skill in already, but certainly an interest creates the enthusiasm, the energy, the desire, and the willingness to succeed in life. My own life story was a good example of this. I've told this story many times, so I'll just be brief with it here, but it really touches upon this point, which was that when I was growing up, when I was in high school, I had an inner experience from past lifetimes, surely, that created a very, very strong motivation that I was going to spend my life as a yogi seeking God. Now, this was a very impractical volition and thought at that time. I was in high school. I had never even met a yogi at that point in my life. I had read a few books on yoga, but it was such a strong inner conviction based on a very strong inner experience that I had, that there was no way I could ignore it. And again, friends, family were trying to gently push me in other directions of a more traditional life. But I listened to this inner calling, and it really changed and guided the course of my life in the direction that it really was meant to go in the end. And so, listen with intuition, practice meditation. Swami Kriyanandaji has talked about how to tune in to inner guidance. And he has suggested meditating, going into meditation, practicing some techniques of meditation, calming the mind, stilling the heart. And then at a certain point when you're very still, he suggests holding up at the spiritual eye a certain decision that you're trying to make. And if you listen sensitively, almost like trying to tune an old-fashioned radio with the dial and there's static and you're trying to find the radio station, if you listen sensitively, you will eventually listen to, perceive, and feel with intuition true inner guidance. Now this takes some experimentation because you'll find that sometimes, especially in the beginning, desires and false inclinations in a way will suddenly appear and you'll get very inwardly excited and even a little bit agitated, but that agitation will appear to be enthusiasm. So it takes some time to discern, to experiment, to practice with it. You will find that as you practice this more and more, and as you take responsibility for the results, that you actually will start to get better results in life. I've seen this in my own life, even after that, making that one big important decision. I have found that more and more easily, not always 100%, but certainly more and more successfully, my inner guidance and my perception of it is more and more true and produces better and better results. And I would never have learned how to do that if I didn't take responsibility for my actions from a very, very young age, even again as young as in high school, when I did, in a way, choose my life's career and life's path at a very young age. Now, it can help to listen to wise people for guidance. So yes, we don't want to go on alone at all times. Even Swami Kriyanandaji, I noticed, when he had an important decision to make in his own life, perhaps in the direction of Ananda, he would still run his thoughts and his ideas by very close friends who he trusted, just to see what they thought and whether they thought this might be the right thing. They might have other ideas that might influence him in the right direction. So it is very, very helpful to go to the wise for such guidance. I'm going to read from the Bhagavad Gita, where essentially this is what Krishna says. And it's especially this wisdom here from the Gita is really about following spiritual inclinations. Because you'll find, and I think everyone who's listening here tonight certainly has strong spiritual samskars in past lifetimes and are pursuing it in this lifetime. And I think you will find, as I have, that again, friends and others who are perhaps living a more traditional lifestyle will try to dissuade you from picking up spiritual pursuits and taking them too seriously. People are fine if you do a little bit of that kind of thing, do some ceremonies, go to a temple. But when you start having a very strong daily meditation practice and start becoming very dedicated to it, you'll find that people will start telling you that it's very impractical, it doesn't help the world any to be sitting there in meditation. And Krishna's advice, again, is to follow the wise and go within. This is chapter 3, stanza 21. Whatever the superior being does, lesser beings imitate. His behavior sets the standard for right living in the world, which is saying, follow the wise, not just listen to their advice, but act as they have. And Swami Kriyanandaji, in his interpretation of this, in his commentary, says, if you are so concerned with doing right, and he points out that people will say this to the spiritual seekers. They will say, if you are so concerned with doing right, why don't you do more for the upliftment of mankind, rather than meditating and pursuing spiritual pursuits that are very impractical? And Swamiji answers this common criticism from worldly people. This very common criticism is a rationale that often dissuades idealistic people from the spiritual path. Why don't you do more for others? It is astonishing how many ways there are of doing good in this world without really accomplishing anything worthwhile at all. Think of the war chests of political parties, money accumulated by people who believe this person or that will change everything for the better. Is any lasting good ever accomplished? That question hardly needs an answer. Think of the ardor with which people campaign to get others to behave as they ought to. People shouting slogans angrily, mounting huge parades, spending vast amounts of money to persuade everyone to stop fighting. Will anger make anyone peaceful? Will merely banning the bomb bring a stop to war? And he goes on, and finally he says, what needs changing is no social system, but human consciousness. The first responsibility that the universe places on every person's shoulders is simply this: change yourself. One moon, it has been pointed out, gives more light than all the stars. One transformed human being has a more beneficial impact on others than 1,000 people campaigning for improvements, which, when the shouting is over, often leave everything no more changed than when a deck of cards is reshuffled. And so a true spiritual path, a true spiritual tradition and teaching will change the person who is practicing it. I've seen this beautiful truth expressed in the lives, my own life, but in the lives of many, many others who have been practicing the teachings of Kriya Yoga and meditation for many, many years. And you'll find that when you change yourself, then you can change others much more easily. You can influence others, you can influence society for the better. Again, you'll also find what is the right thing for you to do. Because, of course, we all must find most people must find an outward expression of these spiritual inclinations and the spiritual upliftment. In fact, we all have a duty to share that with others in some way for the upliftment of others, whether it's sharing spiritual teachings, or if it's just helping others through charitable works, through service, many, many ways. But that will come from within and from your own deep meditation practice. So, again, take responsibility, but do follow the wise when we do listen for wise guidance. Listen to the wise, but also look to the way that they have led their lives. You will see that the saints and the masters, in the end, their lives have been beacons of light and hope to many, many others. And it's not just because of what they did, it was really more because of who and what they are, which is beacons of compassion, kindness, love, giving to others. And this springs from within, from their own fruits of their own spiritual practices, their own sadhana, their own selfless service, karma yoga, devotion, all these things. And so you will find that true spiritual practices, when done over time, deeply, with sincerity, with the guidance of a guru, start to change you to such an extent that you are able to find outward expression for these things and start to be much more of a cause rather than an effect. And again, this comes back to accepting responsibility for the direction of our own lives and starting to work with it in ways that will have an impact on first changing us and then finding outward expression in our career, in our family life, in our work, in our service. And so follow these great teachings of the Masters. that they are giving us here. I'm also going to go and read tomorrow's reading because it's also very interesting and pertinent, and one of the disadvantages of doing this satsang just once a week is that we miss a lot of very, very good topics in the days in between every Wednesday. I suppose if we did this for 7 or 10 years, we would cover them all. But this one, since you'll be reading it tomorrow, those who read every day from Living Wisely, Living Well, I'm going to talk about this now for August 13th. Imagine the worst thing that could happen to you. Then, still imagining, relax your heart and accept it. If you can bear that visualization, inner freedom will be yours. Why not then accept whatever comes? Do you fear death? It can't be avoided, so why fear it? When it comes, accept it willingly, even gladly, for know this, you yourself can never die. Now, in some ways, this teaching is the opposite of what certain New Age teachings proclaim, that we should only think positive thoughts and positive visualizations. Here Swamiji is actually advising not only a negative visualization, but to visualize and imagine the worst fear that you possibly have, and then learning to accept it. And you will find that, indeed, there is a great deal of freedom in accepting inwardly anything that might come to you. And you will find that death is a very good example, because it is something that psychologists and studies have found is perhaps the greatest fear that people have. And you will find an extraordinary inner freedom when you meditate on death. This is a practice that some sects and spiritual paths practice. It's a little bit of a strange practice of meditating in cemeteries and graveyards and the like. And it's not necessary to actually go to the grave and meditate on death, but it is a helpful practice to tune into that and accept the great deal of inner freedom that comes from understanding that this life is a dream, and that if we accept that, accept the fact that it will be over, could be tonight, could be several years from now, you will find that it's much easier to act with a great deal of freedom. I read an interesting story, and it's one of these apocryphal stories of a student who went to study archery from a Japanese archery master. And the student went to the archery master, and the master just looked at him with a great deal of skepticism, because this student came to him and said that he had never studied under any other teacher before, and he did not know anything about archery. And this master archery teacher, again, kept looking at the student, and he really was skeptical. He did not believe him, because he saw something in him, in his aura, in his attitude, his bearing, the way that he expressed himself, a certain confidence, a certain fearlessness that only really, really advanced warriors would have. And he kept sort of interrogating this student, because he didn't want to accept him without really knowing who he was, and he felt that maybe the student was withholding something and perhaps being dishonest. And finally he just asked him, okay, I see something in you that's very unusual. Tell me about your whole life. I want to know what it is that has helped you to become who and what you are right now. And the young man said, okay, there was one thing that really changed my life, changed who I am. It was at a very young age, this young student said, I started seeing death around me. I started seeing people leaving the body, and I started meditating on death. And I started tuning in to the reality of death, and just the fact that nobody can avoid it. And I understood that someday that I would have to leave the body and die. And this young student said, in meditating on that, in going through it rather than avoiding it, in that thought, in that meditation, in that acceptance, I gained a great deal of freedom, and I have a great deal of courage and fearlessness, because I do not fear dying. And so this just simple thought, this simple meditation that this young man had, gave him the qualities of what this master archery teacher saw as a great warrior. And so really this is a very good practice. It helps to meditate on the worst thing that could happen, the worst fears that we have. And it can be something in our daily life. It can be the fear of illness, of losing someone who's close to us, many of these things. And you will find that if you can accept the worst, and it doesn't mean to try to visualize it so that it will happen, but you will find that if you can accept the worst thing that can happen to you, you'll find that you can start to live with a great deal of courage, a great deal of freedom, and you'll find that you will lose that fear. And fear can be one of the most limiting and hobbling emotions that there is. You'll see that people who are always very fearful are always protecting themselves, and even their heart contracts and collapses inward. And so live with courage. And the way to do it again is to follow Swamiji's advice. Swamiji also advised the practice every night when you go to bed, and I think this is probably one of the living wisely, living well things that have been shared recently by him. He said, build a mental bonfire and put on that bonfire everything you own, everything you are, and just watch it all go up so that when you fall asleep at night, you own nothing, you're completely free within, and you can give yourself completely to the infinite. And you'll find if you make this a regular practice, again, there's a great deal of joy and inner freedom that comes from it. Another way to practice this at night is simply just to offer yourself back to God, to the Divine Mother, to the Guru, in complete freedom, almost as imagining that you're going to leave the body that very night. And so if you are going to leave the body that night in your sleep, what would you like to do to prepare for it? And of course, you give everything back to the divine, back to the infinite, your very self, your thoughts, your desires, your fears, your attachments. Give everything, and you'll find that every night you actually become free to a certain extent. And you'll find that when you wake up in the morning, that a great deal of your fears and inhibitions and worries and concerns really have been given away. And of course, you'll start to pick them up during the day, like most people do during the day. But this daily practice over time really does help one to live with much more fearlessness, much more freedom. And you'll find that when you live with this inner freedom, then nothing can stop you in this life. Even when you make a mistake, you simply learn from it, you move on. There's no cause for alarm or concern. Now finally touching on this quality of fear. The great ones have very often talked about this, and I've seen this in the teachings of Yoganandaji and Swamiji and many other teachers, that fear is really a lack of love and heart quality. And this is an interesting thought because you normally wouldn't equate the two together. But in fact, you'll see that those who have, even the expression, someone who has a lot of heart, also implies a lot of courage. And you'll see this with Bhima in the Pandavas, the brothers. He was the one who was the heart-centered one, and the heart chakra he represented according to our line of gurus. And because of that, he not only had a great deal of love and passion and emotion, he also had a great deal of courage, and he was completely fearless. And that courage gave him a great deal of strength. And so enthusiasm, love, heart quality, leading with the heart, in a way, as I've heard the expression say, you'll find that gives you a lot of courage and a lot of fearlessness. I saw this with Swami Kriyanandaji, even when he walked, until this was before he became very, very elderly and the bones start shrinking as they naturally do when you get up in your mid-80s. But he would always lead with his heart. His heart, when he walked, his chest was out, and he had a great deal of courage. And even when life's karmas and different things beat him down, and people betrayed him and these things, he never lost that heart quality, that love for others, that compassion for others, that courage to keep moving forward in life. And so work with these principles, meditate on these principles, live in fearlessness, you'll find that when you can live in fearlessness, you can much more easily accept responsibility for all of your actions, because you'll find that even when you make mistakes, like I said, it's very quickly and very easy just to move on from them. So may the grace and the blessings of our line of masters guide our lives, give us courage, give us strength, give us fearlessness, give us great heart quality and love and energy, and those qualities will guide us towards divine freedom. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.